Honourable Member for Saskatoon West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and of course it's my pleasure as always to speak on this important motion here today, and I'm proud to be speaking on behalf of Saskatoon West. Now, Saskatoon is the economic engine of Saskatchewan. For example, in January there were 6,000 jobs created in Saskatchewan, 4,000 of those were created in Saskatoon. My riding is west of the river in Saskatoon. It includes the downtown commercial with all the high-rises. It has industrial parks for our oil and gas sector, the energy sector. There's much manufacturing and food processing, agriculture. There's grain elevators. There's farm equipment manufacturing in my riding. And of course, it's a transportation hub. We've got highways going in all directions. There's the airport, and then of course, there's trains. There's 75,000 individuals live in my riding, and multi-generation Canadians to new immigrants. And we have the fourth highest urban Indigenous population in Canada. Mr. Speaker, what I do here in this Parliament matters to the people in Saskatoon West. What the Prime Minister does and what the leader of the NDP does, that also matters to the people of Saskatoon West. And today's motion is about the most fundamental bedrock that this country is built on. Today we're debating Canada's Constitution and Saskatchewan's part in it. Now, this motion will rewrite the Saskatchewan Act, which is the legislation that brought our great province into Confederation. Currently, Canadian Pacific Railway may have an exemption under the Act that excludes it from paying taxes to the province. This is a concession that was granted to the railway well over 100 years ago in exchange for its role in building the infrastructure of a province. This point is in dispute and is before the courts, with over $300 million in taxes to the Saskatchewan government at stake. Now, our motion will amend the Saskatchewan Act to remove any ambiguity about this issue and ensure that CP, like its counterpart CN, will pay its taxes like all corporations are required to do. And this will also settle the $300 million plus tax question hanging over the provincial treasury. Mr. Speaker, I want the people of Saskatoon West to know that today I worked with my colleagues throughout Saskatchewan and throughout this House to get this done for them. As MPs, we can get great things done as Canadians when we work together. Now, a little bit of context. The economy, of course, is critical in Saskatchewan, and energy is 26% of our economic activity in the province. We produce an average of 13 million barrels of oil per month, which is about 500,000 barrels a day. And for context, Canada as a whole consumes about 2.5 million barrels a day. And of course, Saskatchewan has another 1.2 billion barrels of oil in reserve. And according to the City of Saskatoon, there are almost 40 businesses in my riding that are directly involved in primary energy production. Hundreds more in secondary manufacturing and service sector jobs that service the energy sector. And of course, there's many workers who live in my riding that drive to drilling locations all over Western Canada. And as I mentioned earlier, Saskatoon has the fourth largest urban Indigenous population in the country. Our companies want to work with Indigenous communities on energy and other projects, and many are. And I want to highlight the work of the Saskatoon Tribal Council that they do in our city. And I quote from their website, "STC Economic Development creates business and industry partnerships to promote sustainable wealth creation for our First Nation communities. Industry partnerships are collaborative agreements between key industrial stakeholders in Saskatchewan and the Tribal Council that are participation-driven rather than profit-driven. STC's industry engagement strategy was developed in response to the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's call to action number 92, which calls for equal access to jobs, training, and education opportunities in the corporate sector, and long-term sustainable benefits from economic development projects." And Mr. Speaker, while I'm talking about the Saskatoon Tribal Council, I want to give them a shout out for the great work that they're doing with their temporary shelter in Saskatoon. Saskatoon faced a housing crisis this winter, and on very short notice back in November, various stakeholders came together, and within weeks, the STC put together a plan to create a shelter facility with 50 beds for the winter. And I visited this facility about 3 weeks after they opened, and it was a very smooth running operation, which is amazing considering they had such a short period of time to get it going. And they're providing such a critical service in Saskatoon. And this is a great example of different organizations and different levels of government working together to creatively solve a problem in a very short period of time. So congratulations to Tribal Chief Mark Arcand and all the staff who are working in the shelter to look after Saskatoon's people and make Saskatoon a better place. Now, STC, again, they've got multiple business partnerships with companies like Sask Energy, the largest energy company in the province, Saskatchewan's largest construction firm, KPCL, and Nutrien, the biggest developer of fertilizer on the planet. Now let's talk about Nutrien a bit. Nutrien is a Saskatoon success story. It's the single largest fertilizer manufacturer on the planet, over 20,000 employees worldwide. And where are its corporate headquarters? Saskatoon West, in my riding. Everybody must be fed, and to feed those people takes a lot of plants or animals that eat plants. And all plants require 4 elements: oxygen, nitrogen, carbon, and potassium. Nutrien extracts potash from the ground, and potash is the potassium component of that equation. The areas around Saskatoon have some of the highest naturally occurring potash reservoirs on the planet. And Potash Corp, the Saskatoon-based predecessor to Nutrien, merged with Agrium 3 years ago to form this new company. And today, no matter what you eat, it has been grown with fertilizer supplied by a company based in my riding. And that brings me to agriculture in general. The lush cropland surrounding Saskatoon makes my riding the perfect hub for all that product to come into. Wheat, canola, pulse, and specialty crops, beef, pork, dairy, chicken, it all has to move through my riding to its destination. If it's cattle or pigs, the animals are on trucks for hours until they reach slaughterhouses in Alberta or Manitoba. The grains and crops make their way to Asia, Europe, and Africa throughout the Americas. And for that, they need to go to Chicago if it's going south, or west to Tidewater, or east to Thunder Bay or the Great Lakes. And all of this takes trains. Yes, trains. So CN has their largest switching yard between Winnipeg and Kamloops on the edge of Montgomery in Saskatoon West. CP has their tracks that run through the core of the city, right through my constituency office, right by my constituency office. Farmers, manufacturers, energy companies, they all depend on these railways to get their products to market. Canada was built on these 2 railways. CN was an amalgamation of a bunch of railways that made up the Yellowhead route between Winnipeg and Kamloops in BC. These railways helped develop the farms and settlements that made up Saskatoon and northern Saskatchewan. CP, of course, traces its roots back to Confederation. The colony of British Columbia joined Confederation on the promise of CP Rail, and Sir John A. Macdonald won and lost his government over the CP Rail scandal. The railways are so critical to our country that they had their own section of the British North America Act. Standing Order 130 of the House of Commons lays out a special procedure to deal specifically with railway legislation separate from regular government business. And today we're debating a motion that deals directly with Canada's Constitution and the requirement of CP to either pay taxes or not in the province of Saskatchewan. Now, 116 years ago, the Saskatchewan Act created my home province, and CP was granted an exemption relating to its land concessions, exempting it from provincial taxes. CP has been a good corporate citizen and has been paying taxes regardless. But now the railway is seeking $341 million in damages from the province in relation to those taxes. The province argues that CP gave up the right to not pay the taxes over 60 years ago and is not owed that money back. So that brings us to the caboose. Where is the train today? Just 3 months ago, the Saskatchewan government introduced a constitutional motion to clear up this issue, and all MLAs supported it. There was perfect unanimity in the Saskatchewan legislature, and that's rare. In that spirit, I'll quote NDP MLA Trent Wotherspoon, who spoke on behalf of the official opposition in the provincial legislature. He said, quote, "This is an important action for us as a province, and it represents history in the making because if this motion succeeds, it would be the first time the Saskatchewan Act in our Constitution has been amended with a motion that originates from the Saskatchewan legislature," end quote. And he's right. The process for amending the Constitution of the provinces under the Constitution Act is, number 1, a motion has to be passed in the legislature of the affected province. And in that case, it was. And number 2 is that the motion has to pass both chambers of Parliament. And 3, once it's approved, it then goes to be published under the Great Seal of Her Majesty. Step 1 is done. Hopefully step 2 can happen today in the chamber. And then the motion in the Senate can pass soon after. And given that we're in Her Majesty's 70th Jubilee year, this would be the perfect present for her to bequeath the people of Saskatchewan with this motion under her Great Seal. These are weighty issues, Mr. Speaker. We're talking about a constitutional issue with real economic consequences for my riding. The energy sector, the agriculture sector, corporate headquarters, jobs, Indigenous development, they're all tied together with the growth of the railways. Saskatchewan and Saskatoon West need the railways to remain strong and healthy. They also need the railways to remember they serve the economic good for the people. Without our people thriving, the railways cannot survive. It's time for CP, the province, and this House to turn the page. I encourage MPs from every party to stand up and support this motion. Thank you.